Good morning. I did not realize that I actually already hit start. And I was like, wow. So you guys literally just saw me like trying to figure out if I wanted to put my standing desk down, or because the lighting is messing with me. So I realized I cannot actually sit down because the lighting setup will not work. So good morning. So today's conversation is gonna be real vulnerable of like, I am here, almost considered like, you know what? I'm in control of this. I can reschedule. And I almost rescheduled because I'm just tired. This week has wiped me out. But I decided because I already kind of broke one commitment to myself this morning about going to the gym. I was like, you know what? No, I think I need to have this conversation. And that's the best part about how we improve mental health is being able to fully accept ourselves and then also other people for exactly where they are. So, and it kind of leads just into general self-care because it's like if you continue the negative critique narrative of like, oh, I'm not put together enough, I'm not da da da. Where's that coming from, right? Like that's coming from not feeling like we're enough as is. We can take that off. We have control over that, and by embracing honesty and openness, we're like. So this morning, I did brush my hair. Hopefully you can see that, but I intended to try the at night curls, and it just didn't work. So then it just kind of turned into, this is going to be our talk today is about what vanity and mental health, how they correlate. And a lot of this is because it's, I feel like I have some like insider information about people's true selves. And that's where it's like, I'm not talking about one person in particular. I'm only talking about me. I am sharing like the insights of the people that I talk to, male and female, of different backgrounds, different populations, and kind of we're all going through the same thing. So when it comes to vanity and it comes to presentation, last week we talked about the identity of hair. So this would have been a cool like addition to the conversation of like, my hair. I was like, what I talked about last week was like, it's just living with straight, very fine hair is easy, but at the same time, it's like has perpetually made me want a little bit more, right? And it's natural to want more, but being able to accept what you have and be okay with that will also release you into being able to like figure out whether it's that you really want more or you just have like honestly an insecurity that needs to be addressed. So so this morning I was like, you know what? We're talking about skin care and mental health today as the concept of vanity and mental health. So I figured why not because I was like really, I had to put a little bit of makeup on because I really couldn't see myself with like the extra bit, but I kept it kind of clean today because this is a conversation that comes from a place where I've had to grow. Like a lot of people could assume I'm just naturally given, yes, I have some natural genetic bone structure, but a lot of it has been learned about how do I grow in my own skincare? What's the impact of skincare on my mental health? And it really didn't make too much of an impact for me until COVID actually. And because I was in a traditional therapeutic setting, had my couch. This is more of a virtual background for the people on YouTube and Facebook, but I had, the couch, I had the therapist chair, I had the office, I had the sound maker, and hold on one second. So I had all of that, but what I didn't have was a reflection of myself. And I've loved mirrors, right? It's like they're great. We love to look at ourselves. Like there's no one who I've known. Well, actually, there's a lot of people I know that go past a mirror and don't like to look at themselves. But that's also the type of person that I was that. I didn't want to look in the mirror. I saw what I saw in the mirror and I didn't like it at a period of my life. And I still teeter on it. But when it comes to like really getting up close, so if I'm looking off from like Facebook, it's because I have my Instagram on Life's Right Size Perspective, and that is an 4K, very high quality video, and you can see skin, you can see a lot. So COVID sent me home to work in this virtual space of like, and I had to, figure out this whole, video therapy, telehealth thing after having been only in person. Well, I've barely been on like Zoom calls at this point, let alone doing and having to look at myself all day. And what I found too, because I was now in an insider place of people's lives, right? I go from seeing people, they come to my office, we have very, stark boundaries. I am now seeing inside these people's lives in a very different way and having more information in a lot of sense that I'm used to. But I was also looking at myself, because if you know anything about Zoom, you got the camera where you look at yourself and you can set up the virtual background. It sometimes can be a distraction, but what really is a distraction is, what really is a distraction is your self-reflection process that goes on simultaneously. Now, if you're anything like me, and I'm not going to say everyone's like, but we all share the fact of humanness, is that when we have a stimulus in front of us, we start to process its meaning. We start to process and try to understand. So if like, and then let alone if there's anything happening in the background of our own picture, we now have a full 360 view of ourselves while also engaging with someone else. So people ask me like, oh yeah, COVID really did damage. And I was like, yep. I'm like, I'm taking my hypothesis, my guess as to like what the impact is going to be, is that we have all, what we're seeing in an increase of attention deficit disorder diagnosis comes from just being overstimulated just from technology and seeing ourselves. If you are on a virtual Zoom call, you can turn off the camera, but then you also disengage from the other people. And then video therapy is also just there's already a distance in it in itself. So having a camera on also helps me assess the person, what their skin looks like, what their hygiene is, right? So I could go into plenty of stories as to why like video therapy and what it's been like for me, but it's also just, I want to stay on the topic of how it's been influenced. It's influenced me to really, I've had to look at myself for the last 4 years, whether I like it or not, while looking at someone else and trying to stay objective and trying to stay focused. Now, there's no perfect science here. Like as mental health, I don't believe in one constant state of happiness. I help people become consistently happier or find the ability and have the skill to become happy. So it's like, at what point are we that happy looking at ourselves that much? That's not the real world here. The energy, the anxiety that we feel can be coming from looking at ourselves too much, but it's also because we're all interconnected in some way. We all feel the energy of the other people. So it's like, if I'm not happy with myself, therefore someone else is not happy with themselves. Is this really like, yeah, and by the time we even get to this conversation, y'all, we've tuned out. This is a very in-depth conversation, which is why I'm going to bring it back to the surface of the skin and just make it about the skin. But there's just so you know, there's a lot of mental power it takes to see ourselves consistently throughout calls, throughout the day, that we never had to deal with prior to COVID. So when you're recognizing that you're being anxious or you're having anxiety, or if you're already in a depressive episode, if you're dealing with mood dysregulation, if you're in a position where something's off, right? Like you just know something's off and you don't know how to go to therapy, right? But is that like, what can you do about it? So one topic of this is skin. Now, what I found from and I'll put a disclaimer, I'm not a skincare expert. This is not medical skincare advice. These are things that you just want you to consider when you think about what the importance of certain things you have in your routine. That there's an imbalance, right? I found that like a lot of the people that I deal with have more severe and persistent mental illness tend to have not ever had a conversation with their parents about appropriate skincare, or they have been, or because there's multiple things, but or being they have had a parent who is hyper hygienic or hyper vigilant when it comes to skincare and Vanity, right? Because we look at this overexposure and then an underexposure. And so when it comes to what's an influence of mental illness and anxiety, I have to go through people's hygiene routines and kind of filter out sometimes like what's appropriate to the general masses. Not like, the stinky friend is not going to feel, they're going to be quite anxious, right? Like, because they know, and sometimes people can't control it because they have got medical conditions and, or they're just in progress. Like, everyone is in progress, right? So when we talk about hygiene, a lot of people with mental illness, just like we have poor hygiene and then poor hygiene standards. So I'll put myself on this spectrum as well. I would say I had poor hygiene standards. My mom did really well. I remember her washing her face, exfoliating, all this, but she was never, like we talked about last week, is like, she was never into the aesthetic of like self-care, of like the beauty form of self-care. And then I also had some influence of it with, another family, my stepmother, and like, she like, yeah, so it's all, we have it there. Finding our own identity while also dealing with, if you know my story enough, that like my mental health issues came from being in a divorced family, just having a lot of stress, losing my father at a young age, and then a perfect combination, if you throw sugar in there, was not in a good place. And I still teeter on that because sugar is a natural part of the world that we live in. Again, won't say, but I bring it up because it is probably the one thing that when people have skin issues, right? So let's talk about like the big effect of mental health is just like if you have acne, if you have scarring, if you have hyperpigmentation, if you have anything that's not smooth and aesthetically pleasing, we tend to start judging ourselves. And then we also tend to start projecting because we don't realize that our brain, just because we have a skull, does not limit our thoughts and where they extend to in our realities. So we become imbalanced just by seeing, like, being our own trigger. And so I know for sure I've stood in the mirror and been like, looking at this. I'm definitely like, if I wasn't into mental health, which is why I can make this about mental health, is that I would be an esthetician or I would be a dermatologist because popping pimples, like that's my weirdness. I'm fine with that. It is like, what is it, ASMR, like totally soothing. But I'm fascinated by the body. So that, right, like that also considers in what our skin is. So if we're looking in the mirror at all times, we've now, since COVID, like I said, we've warped the brain and our ability to understand not being so self-focused, so over into that selfish area, and realizing that like that's also energy being used for us to process, which is causing stress. So sugar is now an issue because not only people have usually have a poor diet in terms of their skin issues. There's a lot of other things that can influence poor skin issues, but a lot of it is internal dysregulation of all the systems. And we have to go inward and take care of your health. But why can't we take care of our health? Well, we've got a distorted, unhealthy healthcare system that doesn't go past the symptoms sometimes because they're burnout. But it requires personal investment at the same time too. Yes, you don't know what you don't know, but seeking knowledge of yourself and knowing your patterns, knowing your symptoms, to have an external perspective of a healthcare provider of insight that we already try to obtain will help us make our own decisions. If you got to try things in life, and in mental health, you also got to try things. You're coming to me to be like, oh, I'm anxious and da. If I provide a suggestion, you got to go try it in order to get something out of it, right? So when we talk about skincare, you got to find something that works for you. And a lot of times when it's done, when we were teenagers, like this is where sometimes I believe teenagers needing help. I'm definitely there for it. But I mean, there's a certain amount of hormonal dysregulation that we all have to go through being in a growth period, that your skin's not going to do exactly what you say, but you can have and prevent, and by working on your diet, working on your just general health and understanding self, because you're not going to be adding fuel to the fire of already being predispositioned to have hormonal imbalance, right? So in youth, we got to start these conversations younger, every generation and every opportunity that we have, because some people we're dealing with generations of people not knowing, right? My mom knew something about facial care and skin care, but did she know enough? Did her parents give her enough information for her to consider that being an influence? I don't know. We don't need to bring my mom into the discussion, but I'm just using it as a representation of like, she knew something, but then now we know more information over studying things, but we will never know enough information if we don't study ourselves, because all this information can't apply exactly to every single person. So we see this imbalance. We talked about the attention to self so much, it can cause some of that imbalance. And this is where I'm going to insert a suggestion. If I give you a suggestion, right, see if you try it, is that the one thing that commonly, if people are doing skincare, if they are, and they do have a skincare routine that works for them, but they still deal with anxiety, there's a lot of like deeper issues that we work on, right? Like I go live every week because I can't talk about everything in one session, is that what I've noticed that usually what's missing is the affirmation. It always comes back down to affirmations. But what I mean by that is just the validation of the moment, the validation that recognition that you are doing something for yourself. It is an investment in self. And this does not have, I'm speaking technically of just the presence of you taking time to shower or time to exfoliate or whatever. We'll talk about the specifics in a moment. But the recognition of the time you take before you even have to buy or do anything, right? What tends to be missing for a lot of people in mental health and recognizing skincare is really honing in on that moment that you are doing something for yourself. It's not an immediate return on investments. Just because you exfoliate once doesn't mean you're not going to get wrinkles. You have to be consistent, right? But consistency does not come until we have started and we continue to go. So I think I found a lot of people because I can't control the reaction that people are going to have when they do like engage in self-care. But what tends to be missing is that mindfulness to the moment of like, you know what, this is a good investment of self. I may not be able to see the effects yet, but I trust that they're going to come, because the more that I exfoliate, the more I hydrate, the more that I put foods into my body that won't react and cause skin issues, the more that I will reap the rewards, right? That's like compound interest. If you think about like finances, is that you put a penny aside, it's better than nothing. Yeah, you may not be able to buy a whole lot today, but in, a year, you're going to have $3.65, right? So it's like, wait, did I do that math? Yeah, I did that math, right? So, we have to start seeing health the same way that we see in finance and business, and a lot of like, you do small things. Self-care are small investments. Short-term investment for long-term outcome is sometimes maybe you can't do it all in a day. So then go to my other videos. Like, we have to learn to be flexible with ourselves, to know that like we've done enough. If we can't do it every single day, it's better than not doing it at all. So get back on track, right? And there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of, different things for people. But I just found that if you do get back on track each time, making sure that you're mindful and you're recognizing that in itself was an achievement, I know that sounds like, yeah, everyone gets a medal. Not everyone, just you. So if you're kind of extinguishing your own happiness by not paying attention to what you're already doing, then you're going to overcompensate and end up doing more that's not necessary, and then you'll burn out, right? Like, and this is where it kind of bleeds into that, I'm going to label it as consumerism, but is that we're like, oh yeah, no, this moisturizer is not, I don't like it, it's a sensory issue. Like, by all means, search for the right thing, but making sure that at some point you can keep it simple. You don't have to go buy all the moisturizers. You don't have to go buy all the wrinkle creams. You don't have to do all that. Most people, because a lot of people's feedback of my transformation have been like, oh, wow, you look younger. And I did take years back for my life because I focused on decreasing stress. Doesn't mean I'm 0% stressed. I did it because I deal with so much stress that brings me up to here that I have to be very intentional about how I bring that level back down every single day in the moment. I'll show you what mine looks like or tell you about my skincare, but this is all like our skin says something. I'm at the point now too where I see people like, and they will react to it because they feel like I'm judging them. So I have to be mindful of that when I say this, is like, but if I see someone's skin, it says a lot about them and just the color of it and something that they can't control. And that also means intentional, because it's like, if you see a Caucasian person that is not looking Caucasian. And that is technically a judgment, but it's more like that tells me that person may not be comfortable with the color of their natural born skin, or like, use a lot of tanning or, stuff like that. We go to extremes because we're not very comfortable with just figuring out what we like about ourselves. So skincare it causes disruption. It causes, and like when it's a problem, right? And, it causes disruptions and dysregulations for people. So my next point here is that be mindful of how attentive you are to yourself. But then the second one is simplicity. I think what's worked for me the most is making sure that if I do have self-care routines that are past that necessary point. So my necessary ones are exfoliate, and I definitely could do more, y'all. I see it, but I'm like, you know what? I've got a lot of other things we got to do, but at some point I'm going to be getting even more refined with my skincare. But up until this point, a lot of it, like, I didn't use a whole lot of products. I bought an exfoliating pad that's like a sea scrub, not sea scrub. What am I trying to say? Like a sponge, sea sponge pad. I exfoliate, keep it in the shower with an antibacterial soap. I don't even really use an acne soap because the antibacterial takes care of that. Like I just use dial soap, and then I moisturize and I drink a lot of water. Water will change your life. A lot of mental illness that I deal with is like slow dehydration because I deal with addictions and backgrounds, and alcohol is extremely dehydrates you. Then we all love coffee, myself included, but coffee, although made with water, it is not water. It will take water out of your system. So a lot of what I see is trying to get people accountable to making sure they drink water and more water. And naturally, since your brain thrives off of that, I'm looking at, are you hydrated? When is the last time you drank water? When is the last time you drank anything? Because a Diet Coke will count, but it won't. Like eventually it will not. And we're extremely dehydrated. Then also water quality is an issue, right? So we come into this intersection of like skincare, mental health now becomes a systemic resource issue. But I stay focused on I stay focused on the individual. It seems very like sometimes I got to block out the stuff that goes on in the world, but a lot of it is because my focus is trying to do what I can to make sure other people are influenced and educated to their degree, right? Like so I have a lot of conversations with my male clients because a lot of men, they didn't necessarily get the same education or treatment from, I don't know, whether it's their mothers, we don't need to go into the systemic family systems of it. They didn't have exposure. They didn't have they were separating men's and women's health because they do need to be separate. But at the same time, it was like not necessarily as talked about, I guess, for a lot of my clients as to what skincare looks like. And also just general health, right? Like, so I focus on the individuals, like, let's find what works for you. And then I also know there's some constants that need to happen, or just foundational things that will help improve not only physical health, but mental health, because we're really taking an intention about paying attention to ourselves and taking responsibility and recognition that we're doing that, because we are the best investment. And so this is where simplicity is key. So I usually tell my male friend, like, if you're going to buy like a lotion or a moisturizer, I have, my team give some recommendations, but also you could really just put try some grapeseed oil, try some collagen lotion or something like that. Something that, is going to feel comfortable on your face, and then also your hands. And a lot of those people just don't moisturize. They don't. And sometimes I can't even figure out how, to get people to shower, because depression is a tricky thing. It manifests so differently for everyone, right? And it's okay if that's where you are, and that's where you are. I'll say it 3 times at the point. But it's also something that if you're wanting to improve because you don't want to feel that way, you don't want to really feel stuck in your life. It's a lot of work to be stuck. It's also a lot of work to live a healthier lifestyle. Choose your hard, right? But I got you. We can figure it out. And then it's just a matter of building consistency at that point. So I found, I guess we're going more back into my there's just a lot of research that shows around like the skincare. So one of the things too, if you want to do your own research, is that really this is backed in terms of my advice, and also I have lived it, is learning more about how your skin is an organ. So the same way that you're trying to like, improve your liver health because your lipids are high and your cholesterol is high, your skin is just as important. So if you're having skin issues, it's probably one of the most distracting, I think, that's why I wanted to talk about it, is with mental health, because the skin is able to be seen. Your liver, you can't really see. You can't conceptualize like, oh, my liver fatty, and this is the impact it's having. But if you have a breakout on your face, or if you have a psoriasis or eczema rash, not only can it be seen by others, but you can see it. And then also, it can be quite painful. It's just, and then pain, this is where you're like, Sarah, everything connects. And I'm like, yes, We're going to intersect back into how pain is usually perceived. And it causes a stress reaction because it will activate our brain just enough that you're starting to get distracted from the reality around you, let alone if it actually hurts a little bit, right? So for example, like I have a standing desk now, right? You see me maybe moving around a little bit more. That's because I keep going back on my feet. I have one foot that I've had an injury before, and so it doesn't hurt a whole lot, but I am mindful of it. If I try to block it out, it gets a lot worse because I'm not able to gauge whether or not my pain level is becoming something that I really need to address, because it's going to be consuming eventually. And so this is where, if we don't consider mental health, brain health as health, your other systems, yeah, you might have a broken leg, that's not all in the brain, but pain is. All that comes and is processed through this computer system that we got here. It's a highly intelligent one, and your body is just as intelligent. So they work together. And so mental health is really about learning how they work together. Just like if people with technology, like you may not be computer literate very well, but you got someone else who's setting up your computer system for you, or your grandma's, because at this point generation, people, like, we know technology, but it grows so fast that we're trying to keep up with it at all time. It's only taken me 30 years to grow to this, like in the last 5 years, to get to be an expert who I am. I'm not an expert in anyone else's life, but I know a few things about the human body and the similarities that we all have and the emotions that we feel. I don't know everything though. So this is where you got to figure out how you become the subject matter expert of you. And your skin is my argument there. I feel like, okay, what is the last point I'm trying to make? Keep it simple, which I have a very, because I am tired, I have a very good ability to go yet around and around the concept again, taking in all perspectives. But what can you do about it? So we talked about the affirmation, because this is going to be kind of like the highlight. So I use my metaphor as, like, for me, like if I do makeup on I really try to be as natural as possible, because I do not feel comfortable with having a whole lot of stuff on my face, because then I touch my face a lot. So that's been a habit that I've had to break. And I'll touch my face and I'll cause a breakout, or I touch my face and I remember I have it and then I don't feel comfortable. And I'm like, yeah, like this is me being vulnerable and turning myself out there because that's the only way that I get to protect and to live my life in a happier place. And so I really tried to just highlight. I learned myself enough and figuring out what I like. And then people are going to give you feedback whether you ask for it or not. So I go ahead and ask for people, like, hey, well, what does this look like? And then I consider, like, is this what I want? Is this what I want to look like, right? So the highlight of what is it that you want when it comes to your skincare, but self-care, right? Is, do you want, if you're feeling more self-conscious, you see the bags under your eyes, if you what is it that you're looking at and that you're reacting to? Because that will tell you a little bit about what you want. Most people, when they come to me, they can tell me what they don't want. Well, I don't want to do this. I don't want people to think this. I don't want this, right? I'm like, well, let's turn that around. Like, what is it that you do want from that? Do you want to be, I don't want to fail. I want to be successful, right? And we're reframing when you're looking at your skin, when you're looking at your self-care routine and where you're at right now. If you're reacting to yourself negatively, that's telling you what it is that you want. Take a look at it. So that's my first highlight of this, right? So then it's the keep it simple. What is going to be something, what's that, something you do already, something that you already have. Take inventory of what it is, like that your products you have. If it's not necessary, you got to get rid of it. But it's like, if you really have something already that you just need to try again, and you just have to be consistent with it, because consistency will confuse us to be like, oh, well, it was the product that was the problem. Probably not. It was probably how you used it, or it could have been that you're allergic to it. Don't use something that is caused a reaction. But take inventory of what you already have before you just go outside again thinking that you need something more to make you feel more confident about yourself. It's not. It's usually slowing the process down and keeping it simple. So figuring out, so for me, like my moisturizer for my face, I actually is a body cream, but it's a collagen body cream. So that to me, it made my skin softer. It has kept me looking, but I eventually do plan on going to a dermatologist to see whether or not I want to take it a step further. Have I tried Botox? Yeah, I've tried it. Do I do it anymore? No. Do I see why people invest in it? Abso-freaking-lutely. So what else have I tried? I've done full faces of makeup. The beauty filters, that's a whole freaking other topic in itself when we talk about skin, because just realistically, people have really good skin, but it may be predisposition to not be that smooth. And that's something that we also have to work on accepting. About ourselves, not just like, because if it can be changed, by all means, try to change the system that has been in place, because it needs to be. But if it comes down to your own genetics and your skin smoothness, I don't know, that may be out of just my wheelhouse in general. So the highlight there is, is there a way that you can accept what you already have and that you need to work on there? Because if there is something that is change worthy in that, it only can come with acceptance sustainably, because it may be a slow process. You may have to accept the moment. You may have to accept patience over progress for a period or a season of your life. And because some things just in life will become disrupted. They will, there's a lot of other things going on. So that's just one highlight, is like, how can you accept what it is that you have before you can move on to what it is that you feel like you don't have, and reframe that to what it is that you want. Because everyone deserves to get what they want, but sometimes we got to get what we need first before we can keep that. So there was one more highlight of that, and I think I forgot it at this point, but I think a lot of it really I've said, enough about. If you have questions about skincare, I can definitely, if I don't know I will always likely have an answer. If I don't have an actual educated answer, I'll just either search one out or refer you to somewhere else. But most of my stuff is backed up either by my personal experience or like data that I just don't talk about the data, because I don't remember all the data, honestly. Like 62% of Americans are suffering from eczema right now. I mean, we could Google it. Like that's what keeps these wrinkles out of my skin, is because I don't have to, I know it's there. And it's a problem. So let's talk about how we can provide that solution. And the solution is people taking that on, the ownership of you know what, if I suffer with this, I don't want to suffer like this, then I will do what it takes. And you'll ask the question. A lot of people, I just really say, and this is kind of getting away from skincare, but a lot of it's related to, is ask the question that you have on your brain. Try to write it out if you feel like you can't find a question, because it's like there's usually a question in there before, and then someone else may have to figure out, they have to take some time to give you your answer. Everyone's allowed to say no. Everyone's allowed to say no. Not a lot of people may like it, but everyone's allowed to say no. And what I encourage my clients to do is leave room for that, but also make sure that that no for them, if they really need something, that it becomes another question. It becomes how can I get this? Because it may just not be that from that person. So a lot of it comes in relationships. So it's like, well, can I be vulnerable? And if you give that, make that person aware that you're about to be vulnerable, you'll have less likely to have fear as influence in the miscommunication of your needs or how you build with someone. That goes for the relationship with yourself as well, the narrative that you have internally, and how you speak to yourself. Because it's you kind of have to give yourself permission Or you can come to a session with me and I can help give you that permission, or send you in the direction of what permission looks like for you, because we do not need to be dependent on everyone. So that is what I got for y'all today for skincare and mental health. I said I'm keeping it short. I guess 35 minutes for me is short, but I maybe taking next week off. We'll see. This has been a really challenging week for me. But I wanted to show up today just to kind of, represent, like, doesn't have to be excessive. Skincare is highly important to your health. It is an organ, and it is directly related to your mental health. And taking it seriously, but also knowing how to rest and, like, having fun. Doesn't all have to be about health all the time, but everything should align with health. And I think you guys next week, I don't know what we'll talk about, but if you have any suggestions, please let me know of topics you want me to expand on, or problems it is that you want to address in your life, and I can see what I can do. You guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you maybe next week.